Chapter 19. Welcome. Another shock awaited the children when Mama Apaya took them back to the flat. The first face Sade saw behind Mrs. Graham was Kevin's. He grinned as soon as he saw them, and it wasn't a friendly grin. The twins looked up, then continued playing with their Lego. Stepping into the room, Sade realised that Iowa Wojeni was there too. "I was hoping you'd get back before I left. How did it go?" she asked. "I can see you're all washed out. Kevin, go and put on the kettle, there's a good boy." Mrs. Graham put her arms around Sade and Femi. "When are you going to tell them then?" Kevin almost crowed. He didn't move from where he was leaning on the television, leering at them. "Don't you be so nosy, my boy. Go and do as I say." Kevin sloped away, his tongue click-clocking to sound like a horse trotting off. Iowa Jenny led the children to the sofa. "I came round to tell you that we've managed to find you another foster family." The words floated in Sade's head for a few seconds, not making sense. Why another foster family? They were just getting used to being with Mrs. Graham, even if Kevin didn't like them. "You remember I explained that Mrs. Graham was only able to take you on a temporary basis. It was an emergency to start with, and that's why Mrs. Graham helped us out." "They've been lovely children, no trouble at all," said Mrs. Graham. "Mum!" Kevin yelled from the kitchen. "Your kettle's boiled." "I'm going to take you to Mr. and Mrs. King tomorrow. Their children are grown up, so you'll each be able to have a room to yourselves." Iowa Jenny looked earnestly from Sade to Femi. "I'm sure you'll like them too." "I will still come to see you there," Mama Apaya reassured, "so don't worry." The adults were all smiling. How could Mama Apaya say don't worry? They were surrounded by strangers in a strange land in which Uncle Dele, the only person who really knew them, had disappeared. "The Kings are from Jamaica, and Mr. King is very interested in Nigeria. You'll get on well, I know," Iowa Jenny encouraged. "And now that your permission to stay has been sorted out for a while, Mrs. King will organise for you to go to school." Sade said nothing. With everything sorted out, what was there to say? They were simply being parcelled up again and sent on to another address. Mr. and Mrs. King lived in a quiet road of red brick houses with arched doorways and small front gardens behind hedges, not very far from Mrs. Graham's flat. As they stood next to Iowa Jenny, waiting for the door to open, Sade knew from Femi's drooping figure that he was as miserable as she was. But Mama would have expected more of her. "You must help your brother, Sade. Sorrow is like a precious treasure, shown only to friends." Sade imagined a string pulling up her head like a puppet. The lady who invited them in had an open, pleasant face. She seemed quite tall, but that might have been because her thick grey hair, drawn back from her light brown forehead, was piled up high and tied with a twist. Her neat-fitting blue dress with small yellow flowers gave her a bright air. "We've been expecting you, my dear," Mrs. King greeted Iowa Jenny, then turned to the children. "We're very pleased to welcome you." Her voice moved with a light lilt. "Indeed we are." Another voice as deep as a bass drum came from the back room. A powerfully built man entered the hallway with his arms stretched out to shake their hands. His hair was mottled with grey. He looked older than Uncle Tunde, but he still moved with a useful swing. His face was as rich as ebony as Papa's, with strong, direct gaze and an easy smile. Mr. King led them into a small sitting room. There were books and newspapers everywhere. Unlike at Mrs. Graham's, Mrs. King followed with a tray of glasses and a jug of orange juice. "Well," she said, "we hope you children will feel at home with us. Please call me Aunt Gracie, and this is Uncle Roy." "Who can say? We might even be related." The rhythm in Uncle Roy's words matched his wife's. It was his dream, he said, to go one day to West Africa. "It's the home of our ancestors, you know," he told them. Since he had retired from the post office, he'd been reading a lot about the African continent. "I'm sure you children will teach me a thing or two, huh?" he said. "Give them time to settle now before you start badgering them with questions," Aunt Gracie chided him. They were to have a bedroom each, one next to the other, and both overlooking the back garden. Mrs. King explained that they had been their children's rooms. They were grown up now, and both living away from London. Sade's eyes were drawn to a small desk placed underneath the window and a bookshelf on the wall above the bed. The walls were painted a light ochre with like ripe corn, and the curtains and bed cover were patterned with the yellows and greens of pineapples. Femi's room was an emerald sea green. Perhaps the Kings were trying to recall some of the light and colours from tropical Jamaica. Sade found a girl's annual on the bookshelf in her room, and even though it was 10 years out of date, she spent most of the afternoon on the bed reading. Towards evening, familiar smells from the kitchen forced her to interrupt the adventures in an English boarding school. She stared at the creases in the printed pineapples all around her and ached for Mama's voice to call her to eat. Aunt Gracie had made them a special meal, chicken stew with fried yams, fried plantains, and a spinach soup that she'd learned from a Nigerian friend. Femi tucked in without comment, but Sade felt awkward, not wanting to talk, but not wanting to be rude. The Kings seemed to have understood that the children were still reluctant to speak, and for most of the meal carried on their own conversation. But just as they were finishing the meal with tinned guavas and cream, Aunt Gracie spoke about registering the children in school the following day. Femi would probably be accepted in Greenslade Primary and Sade at Avon, a large secondary school. They would then have a couple of days to get ready before starting school after the weekend. If your schools in Nigeria are like those in Jamaica, you'll find them quite different here, you know, Aunt Gracie said, as if in preparation. Discipline in Jamaica is very firm, certainly in my day it was. Don't be frightening them, Gracie, before they even step foot in the place. Sade looked from one to the other. It was a bit like when Papa and Mama disagreed, Papa's voice suddenly sparking like a match. With adults, the meaning was often in what they didn't say. What did Uncle Roy mean by frightening them? School had never been frightening to her. In fact, she'd always loved going. That was there at home, not here. She was not looking forward to tomorrow.